The world went straight to hell on a Tuesday, which was pretty messed up when you thought about it. Marcus Webb had always figured if the apocalypse was gonna roll around, it'd at least have the decency to show up on a Monday when everyone already felt like death warmed over. But nope, here he was, crouched behind a busted-up Honda Civic at 3 in the afternoon, watching a pack of zombies shuffle past the gas station like they were just out for a casual stroll. Except these freaks weren't window shopping, they were hunting, and anything with a pulse was on the menu. Marcus pressed his back against the car's grimy exterior, his breath coming out in short, quiet bursts. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely keep his grip on the crowbar he'd snagged from an abandoned hardware store 2 days back. 2 days. That's how long it had been since everything went sideways. 48 hours since the news stations stopped broadcasting anything except that emergency alert tone that made your skin crawl. 48 hours since his neighborhood went from backyard barbecues and kids playing street hockey to screaming, running, and things that used to be people trying to rip your throat out with their teeth. The zombies were maybe 20 feet away now, close enough that Marcus could hear the nasty sounds they made, all groaning and clicking in this wet, rattling thing that came from deep in their chests. There were 5 of them, all different sizes and shapes, wearing the remains of whatever they'd had on when they turned. One was in a business suit, tie hanging loose and shirt covered in dark stains that definitely weren't coffee. Another was wearing scrubs, probably a nurse or doctor before everything went south. That messed with Marcus's head more than he wanted to admit. These things had been regular people just days ago, living their lives, making plans, giving a damn about stuff that didn't matter anymore. He couldn't think about that right now. Thinking would get him killed. Marcus had learned that lesson real quick when his upstairs neighbor, old Mr. Patterson, who used to complain about Marcus's music being too loud, came crashing through his apartment door with milky white eyes and chunks missing from his arm. Marcus had frozen up then, couldn't make his body move, couldn't process what he was seeing. He'd almost died right there in his living room, still holding the PlayStation controller from the game he'd been playing. Almost. His little sister Tanya had saved his ass, smashing Mr. Patterson over the head with a table lamp until he went down and stayed down. Tanya. Marcus's chest got tight thinking about her. They'd gotten separated yesterday during a supply run that went bad fast. One minute they were grabbing canned goods from a picked-over corner store, the next minute a whole swarm of those things came pouring out of the back room like someone had rung a dinner bell. They'd run in different directions, planned to meet up at the old community center on 5th and Madison, but when Marcus had finally made it there after dodging zombies for 6 hours straight, the place was crawling with the undead. No sign of Tanya. No sign of anyone living. He'd been looking for her ever since, hitting every spot in their neighborhood that she might have headed to, but so far, nothing. He couldn't let himself think about what that might mean. She was smart, scrappy, way tougher than her 17 years would suggest. She was okay. She had to be okay. The zombie pack was moving past now, heading down the street toward what used to be a pretty decent Chinese restaurant. Marcus waited, counting to 30 in his head before he risked peeking around the side of the Honda. The coast looked clear, relatively speaking. In this new world, nothing was ever really clear. Death could come shambling around any corner, any time. But the immediate threat had passed, and that was good enough. He needed to keep moving, needed to get to higher ground before dark. Everyone who'd survived this long knew the golden rule: never, ever be caught outside after sunset. The zombies were bad enough in daylight, but when night fell, they got active in ways that would make your blood run cold. Faster, more aggressive, like whatever virus or weird science experiment or act of God that made them also gave them some kind of twisted nocturnal boost. Marcus took off running, keeping low, his beat-up sneakers barely making a sound on the cracked pavement. He'd always been quick, ran track in high school before he dropped out junior year, and now that speed was the only thing keeping him breathing. He cut through an alley, jumped a chain-link fence that rattled way too loud for comfort, and kept pushing forward. His destination was the old Riverside apartment complex about 6 blocks north. It was a tall building, 12 stories, and word on the street, back when there were still enough survivors around to have a street with words on it, was that some people had fortified the upper floors. If that was true, if there were actually people up there working together and staying alive, then maybe they'd seen Tanya. Maybe she'd made it there. It was a long shot, Marcus knew that, but long shots were all anyone had left these days. He was halfway to Riverside when he heard it, a sound that made him stop dead in his tracks. Not the groaning of zombies, not the creepy silence that seemed to hang over everything now that the cars and crowds and general noise of city living had disappeared. This was different. This was a voice, a human voice, calling out for help. Marcus's first instinct was to run toward it, to help whoever was in trouble, because that's what you did, right? You helped people. But his second instinct, the one that had been getting stronger these past 2 days, told him to keep his head down and keep moving. You couldn't save everyone. Sometimes you couldn't save anyone. Getting yourself killed trying to be a hero didn't help nobody. But then he heard it again, younger this time, desperate, and Marcus's feet were moving before his brain could talk him out of it. He followed the sound down a side street, past a burning car that had probably been on fire for days, past bodies that he tried real hard not to look at too close. The voice was coming from inside a pharmacy, the big chain kind with the bright lights and rows of everything you could ever need, except now the windows were smashed in and the lights were dead and the shelves were mostly empty, torn apart by looters and survivors and probably zombies just trashing the place because that's what they did. Marcus approached carefully, crowbar raised, every muscle in his body coiled tight and ready to bolt. He could see movement inside through the broken window, shadows shifting in the dimness. "Hey," he called out, keeping his voice low but clear. "You in trouble? You bit?" That was another golden rule, always check if someone was bit. A bite meant you were done, just a matter of time before you turned into one of those things, and Marcus had heard horror stories about people hiding bites, trying to stick with groups right up until they turned and took everyone else down with them. Not bit, man, just stuck. The voice belonged to a kid, couldn't have been more than 15, with a mop of red hair and freckles covering every inch of his pale face. He was standing on top of the pharmacy counter, and below him, 3 zombies were reaching up with dead hands, grabbing at his legs like kids trying to snag candy from a piñata. The kid was holding them off with what looked like a mop handle, jabbing down whenever one got too close, but Marcus could see he was wearing out fast. Sweat was pouring down his face, and his arms were shaking from the effort. "All right, hold tight, I'm coming in," Marcus said, even though every survival instinct in his body was screaming that this was stupid, this was how you died, saving some random kid you didn't even know. But he'd already made the choice, and Marcus Webb might have been a lot of things, a dropout, a screw-up, a guy who'd never really had his life together even before the world ended, but he wasn't the kind of person who could walk away from someone in trouble. Not when he could do something about it. He slipped through the broken window, glass crunching under his feet, and the zombies' heads snapped toward him like they were on strings. 2 of them turned away from the kid and started stumbling in Marcus's direction, arms outstretched, mouths hanging open to show broken teeth and black tongues. Marcus's heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat, but he pushed the fear down, channeled it into something useful. Fear could make you freeze or it could make you fight. He chose fight. The first zombie got close enough that Marcus could smell it, that awful rotting meat smell mixed with something chemical and wrong. He swung the crowbar hard, catching it right in the temple with a sound like a hammer hitting a watermelon. The thing dropped, and Marcus didn't wait to see if it was getting back up. He spun toward the second zombie, this one a woman in a torn postal worker uniform, and brought the crowbar down on top of her head. She crumpled, and Marcus felt his stomach lurch but swallowed it down. No time to be sick. No time to think about how these things used to be people with families and jobs and favorite TV shows. The third zombie was still focused on the kid, still reaching and grabbing, and Marcus came up behind it and drove the crowbar into the base of its skull. It went down hard, and suddenly the pharmacy was quiet except for the sound of Marcus and the kid breathing heavy, trying to catch their breath and process the fact that they were still alive. "Holy crap, man, thank you so much," the kid said, jumping down from the counter and nearly tripping over one of the bodies. "I thought I was done for. I've been stuck here for like 2 hours, maybe more, I don't even know. I lost my watch and my phone's dead and everything's just so messed up, you know?" "Yeah, I know," Marcus said, checking the kid over quick to make sure he really wasn't bit. He looked clean, just scared out of his mind and running on adrenaline. "What's your name, kid?" "Danny. Danny Foster. I'm not a kid, by the way, I'm 15 and a half. All right, Danny, I'm Marcus. Here's the deal, we gotta move, right now. It's gonna be dark soon, and we need to be somewhere safe before that happens. You got people? Family? Anyone you're trying to find?" Danny's face did something complicated, emotions flickering across it too fast to track. "Had people? My dad, he turned. First day. And my mom, she tried to help a neighbor who was bit and didn't tell us, and..." He trailed off, and Marcus could fill in the blanks. Same story everyone had, variations on a theme of loss and terror and everything falling apart faster than anyone could have imagined. "I'm sorry, man. That's rough," Marcus said, and meant it. "Look, I'm heading to Riverside, the apartment building. Heard there might be survivors there. You can come with me if you want, but we gotta move now." Danny nodded fast, looking relieved to have someone else making decisions. "Yeah, okay, yeah. I don't have anywhere else to go anyway." They left the pharmacy together, moving quick and quiet through streets that had turned into something out of a nightmare. Cars were abandoned everywhere, some with doors hanging open like their occupants had just vanished mid-escape. Trash blew across intersections where traffic lights still cycled through their patterns for nobody. In the distance, smoke rose from a dozen different fires, painting the sky in shades of gray and black. Here and there, they saw zombies, solo or in small groups, and each time they'd freeze, wait, then slip past or take a different route. Fighting was always a last resort. Fighting made noise, and noise brought more of them. They were 3 blocks from Riverside when they ran into the others. 4 people, 3 adults and a teenager, moving with the kind of careful coordination that said they'd been surviving together for a bit, had figured out how to work as a team. The one in front was a tall black woman, maybe 35, with her hair tied back tight and a baseball bat in her hands. Behind her was a stocky Hispanic guy with a thick beard and a kitchen knife duct taped to a broomstick, making a pretty effective spear. Then came a white woman, thin and nervous-looking, carrying a backpack that seemed too heavy for her frame, and finally another teenager, a girl with dark skin and her hair in braids, holding a crowbar similar to Marcus's. The woman with the bat saw Marcus and Danny first, and her whole body tensed up, the bat coming up into a ready position. "Stop right there," she said, her voice hard and no nonsense. "Y'all bit?" "No, ma'am, we're clean," Marcus said, raising his free hand in a non-threatening gesture. "Just trying to get to Riverside before dark." The woman studied them for a long moment, her eyes sharp and assessing, the kind of look that probably missed nothing. Then she seemed to relax a fraction, though the bat stayed up. "Riverside's where we're headed to. Safety in numbers, I guess, if you two want to tag along. But we got rules. No heroics, no stupid risks, and if anyone gets bit, they get left behind. No exceptions. We clear?" "Crystal," Marcus said. Danny nodded vigorously beside him. "I'm Lieutenant Keisha Brooks, retired Army," the woman said, which explained the no-nonsense attitude and the way she carried herself like she was still on a mission. "This is Javier Martinez, Ashley Brennan, and my niece, Zoe Brooks. We've been holed up in a storage facility since this started, but our supplies ran out and the building got compromised. Riverside's our best shot at finding a sustainable situation. Introductions were cut short by the sound that everyone had learned to dread, a low collective moan that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The group turned as one, looking back down the street they'd just come from, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. There had to be 50 of them, maybe more, shuffling forward in a mass of dead flesh and reaching hands. A horde. The kind of group that could tear through anything in its path, that couldn't be fought or reasoned with, only escaped. Run! Keisha didn't yell it, didn't need to. Everyone was already moving, sprinting down the street toward Riverside, feet pounding pavement, breath coming in gasps. Marcus grabbed Danny's arm, making sure the kid didn't fall behind, and they ran like their lives depended on it because they absolutely did. Behind them, the moaning got louder, more insistent, and Marcus risked a glance back to see the horde had picked up speed, responding to the sight and sound of prey. Riverside came into view, the tall building rising up like a fortress, and Marcus had never been so happy to see a rundown apartment complex in his life. The front entrance was barricaded with furniture and sheets of plywood, but Keisha seemed to know what she was doing. She led them around to the side where a fire escape hung down, the ladder pulled up to the first landing, out of reach of any zombies that might wander by. "Hathiyaar, boost!" Keisha ordered, and the stocky man locked his hands together, giving her a foothold. She jumped, caught the bottom rung of the ladder, and pulled herself up with the kind of upper body strength that came from serious training. Once on the landing, she reached down. "Ashley, you're next." They got Ashley up, then Zoe, moving with practiced efficiency that said they'd done this kind of thing before, had drilled for emergencies. Marcus pushed Danny forward. "Go, kid, move." Danny scrambled up with Javier's help, then it was Marcus's turn. He could hear the horde getting closer, could hear the scrape and shuffle of dozens of feet on concrete. Javier boosted him, and Marcus jumped, his fingers closing around the cold metal of the ladder rung. He pulled himself up, muscles burning, and then reached down for Javier. The big man backed up a few steps, got a running start, and jumped. His hands slapped against the ladder, but his grip didn't hold. He slipped, fell back to the ground, and the horde was rounding the corner, 20 yards away and closing fast. Javier's eyes went wide with fear, and Marcus could see him calculating, knowing he didn't have time for another try. "Come on, man, you got this!" Marcus yelled, hanging down as far as he could, stretching his arm out. Keisha was beside him, doing the same, both of them reaching. Javier jumped again, and this time Marcus caught his wrist, felt Keisha grab the other one. They pulled, straining with everything they had, and Javier's feet left the ground just as the first zombie reached the spot where he'd been standing. They hauled him up onto the landing, everyone breathing hard, and Javier looked back at the horde below with a shaky laugh. "Too damn close," he muttered. "Way too damn close." "Tell me about it," Marcus said, his heart still racing a mile a minute. Below them, the zombies had gathered under the fire escape, reaching up uselessly, their moans echoing off the building walls. They were trapped down there for now, but who knew for how long? The group needed to get inside, needed to secure themselves before anything else went wrong. Keisha led them up the fire escape to the third floor, where a window had been pried open and reinforced with wire mesh that could be unlocked from the inside. She knocked on the window frame in a pattern, 3 quick raps, 2 slow ones, then 3 quick again. For a long moment, nothing happened, and Marcus started to wonder if the rumors about Riverside being occupied were just wishful thinking, stories survivors told themselves to keep hope alive. Then the wire mesh moved, pulled aside by hands from within, and a face appeared in the window, a middle-aged white guy with a gray beard and suspicious eyes. "Keisha Brooks," the man said, sounding surprised. "Damn, we thought you were dead. Heard the National Guard convoy you were with got overrun on day 1. Wasn't with the Guard when things went south," Keisha replied. "I was visiting family. And I don't die easy, Tommy. We coming in or what?" Tommy, whoever he was, stepped back and gestured for them to climb through. One by one, they entered the building, finding themselves in a hallway that had been transformed into something like a fortress checkpoint. The walls were reinforced with furniture and metal sheets, and there were weapons stashed in corners, everything from baseball bats to what looked like a couple of hunting rifles. More people emerged from rooms along the hall, maybe 10 or 12 in total, all looking at the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Welcome to Riverside Sanctuary," Tommy said, and there was something darkly ironic about the way he said it. "We've got rules here, and if you want to stay, you follow them. No exceptions, no excuses. Rule 1, everyone contributes. We got work shifts, scavenging runs, guard duty, cooking, maintenance, all of it. You don't work, you don't eat. Rule 2, no bites, no infections. Anyone showing symptoms gets quarantined immediately, and if they turn, they get put down. Rule 3, resources are rationed and shared equally. No hoarding, no stealing. Break that rule and you're out on your ass with the dead ones. We clear?" Everyone nodded. The rules were harsh but fair, the kind of thing you needed to survive when the world had gone to hell. Marcus looked around at the faces of the other survivors, seeing the same mix of fear and determination that he felt in his own gut. These were ordinary people, teachers and mechanics and office workers and students, all thrown into an impossible situation and doing their best to make it through to tomorrow. "We're clear," Keisha said. "Appreciate you taking us in, Tommy. This is Javier, Ashley, my niece Zoe, and we picked up Marcus and Danny on the way here. They're good people." "Everyone's good people until they're not," Tommy said, but his tone had softened a bit. "But we'll take all the help we can get. Lost 3 folks yesterday during a supply run that went bad. We need bodies, able-bodied people who can fight and work. You all look like you can handle yourselves." He led them deeper into the complex, explaining the setup as they walked. The survivors had fortified floors 3 through 6, using the stairwells as choke points that could be defended if zombies somehow made it into the building. The lower floors were left empty, a buffer zone, and the upper floors were too exposed and hard to defend. Sleeping quarters were communal, with people bunking in apartments that had been cleared out and reinforced. Food was stored in what used to be the building manager's office, under heavy guard, and water was collected from the roof when it rained and rationed carefully. It was a system, functional if fragile, and Marcus could see how much work had gone into making it happen. These people had carved out a small pocket of civilization in the middle of chaos, and as rough as it was more than most survivors had. He felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in days, something that might have been hope. Maybe they could actually make it here. Maybe this could work. They were assigned to an apartment on the 4th floor, a 2-bedroom unit they'd be sharing with another small group. The place was sparse, furniture pushed against the windows as extra barricades, mattresses on the floor for sleeping, but it was indoors and relatively safe, which made it a palace compared to anywhere Marcus had been lately. He dropped his crowbar and sat down heavily on one of the mattresses, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. His body ached from running and fighting in 2 days of constant fear and adrenaline. Danny sat down nearby, looking lost and overwhelmed, and Marcus felt a pang of sympathy for the kid. 15 years old and his whole world had been ripped apart, everything he'd known and counted on just gone. Marcus knew that feeling, was living in himself, but at least he was in his 20s and had a few more years of life experience to draw on. Danny was just a kid who should have been worrying about homework and video games and asking someone to prom, not fighting zombies and wondering if he'd live to see next week. "You did good out there," Marcus said, trying to offer some kind of comfort. "Kept your head, didn't panic. That's not easy." "I was terrified the whole time," Danny admitted, his voice small. "Yeah, man, we all were. Still are. Being scared doesn't mean you didn't do good. It means you're smart enough to understand how bad things are, and you did what you needed to do anyway. That's courage, even if it doesn't feel like it." Before Danny could respond, a woman entered the apartment, someone Marcus hadn't seen during the initial introductions. She was probably in her late 20s, with olive skin and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. She had the kind of face that looked like it smiled a lot under normal circumstances, but right now she wore an expression of serious focus. "Hey, I'm Rachel Kowalski," she said, giving them a nod. "I'm one of the coordinators here, help Tommy keep things running. You guys need anything? Food, water, medical attention?" "Water would be amazing," Marcus said, realizing how dry his throat was. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a proper drink. Rachel disappeared and returned a minute later with a couple of bottles of water, the fancy kind that probably cost $5 each back when money meant something. Now they were just survival, pure and simple. Marcus drank half his bottle in one go, the cool liquid feeling like heaven going down. "Tommy probably already told you, but we do a community meal in the evening, around 6 if anyone's got a working watch," Rachel said. "It's not much, usually canned soup or beans, whatever we've got, but it's hot and it's something. After that, we do a kind of group meeting where we talk about what needs doing, plan scavenging runs, that sort of thing. You're welcome to sit in, get a feel for how things work around here." "Sounds good," Marcus said. "Hey, I gotta ask, have you guys seen a girl come through here?" 17, African American, short hair, probably scared out of her mind. "Her name's Tanya Webb. She's my sister. We got separated." Rachel's expression turned sympathetic. "I'm sorry, I haven't seen anyone matching that description. But we've had people come and go, and I don't know everyone who's passed through. You could ask around at the meeting tonight, see if anyone else has seen her." It wasn't the answer Marcus had hoped for, but it wasn't a no either. There was still a chance, still a possibility that Tanya had made it somewhere safe, even if it wasn't here. He had to hold on to that, had to believe she was out there fighting to survive just like he was. The rest of the afternoon passed in a kind of blur. Marcus and Danny were shown around the secured floors, introduced to more survivors, given a crash course in the routines and systems that kept Riverside functioning. Everyone had jobs, tasks that needed doing to keep the group alive. Some people were on guard duty, watching the streets below for zombie movements and any potential threats. Others were working on reinforcing barricades, constantly improving their defenses. A few were in what they called the workshop, an apartment where people were making weapons and tools from whatever materials they could scavenge, getting creative with duct tape and nails and broken furniture. Marcus volunteered for the next scavenging run, figuring it would give him a chance to look for Tanya while also contributing to the group. The runs happened every few days, small teams going out to hit stores and houses that hadn't been completely picked over yet, looking for food, medicine, batteries, anything useful. It was dangerous work, the kind of thing that had killed 3 people just yesterday according to Tommy, but it was necessary. They couldn't survive on what they had forever. Eventually, the supplies would run out, and they'd have to take risks to find more. When evening came, everyone gathered in the largest apartment on the 4th floor, a 3-bedroom unit that served as a common area. There were maybe 25 people in total, all different ages and backgrounds, brought together by nothing except the desire to stay alive. They sat on the floor, on broken furniture, leaning against walls, and ate their rations of canned beef stew that had been heated up on a camp stove someone had scavenged from a sporting goods store. It wasn't gourmet, but it was warm and filling, and Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd had a hot meal. After eating, Tommy stood up and addressed the group, going over the day's events, what had been accomplished, what still needed doing. They'd reinforced the stairwell barriers, set up some noise traps on the lower floors that would alert them if zombies got inside, and one team had successfully raided a pharmacy about 8 blocks away, bringing back medications that could mean the difference between life and death if someone got injured or sick. "We also picked up some new folks today," Tommy said, gesturing to Marcus, Danny, and the others who'd arrived with Keisha. "They're gonna need time to settle in, learn our systems, but from what Keisha tells me, they can handle themselves in a fight." "That's good, because we're gonna need fighters in the days ahead." "What do you mean?" someone asked, a younger guy with nervous energy. Tommy's expression turned grim. "Zombies are getting thicker around here, more of them every day. I think we're seeing herds forming, big groups moving through the city. We've been lucky so far, stayed off their radar, but it's only a matter of time before a big enough horde decides to take interest in this building. When that happens, we need to be ready. Need to have escape routes planned, supplies packed, everything set so we can bug out fast if we have to. The room went quiet, everyone processing that information. Marcus felt his stomach sink. They'd just found this place, just started to feel like maybe they had a chance, and now they were talking about having to leave? But he knew Tommy was right. Nowhere was safe forever, not in this new world. You had to stay flexible, stay ready to move, or you'd end up dead. In the meantime, we keep doing what we're doing, Tommy continued. We survive, we help each other, and we don't give up. This isn't the end of humanity, not if we got anything to say about it. We're still here, still fighting, and as long as we got that, we got hope. It was a good speech, the kind of thing that probably would have gotten applause in the old world. Here, people just nodded, their faces set with determination. Hope was in short supply these days, but it was the only thing keeping anyone going. After the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself standing by one of the barricaded windows, looking out at the city below. The sun had set fully now, painting everything in shades of darkness broken only by the occasional fire or distant emergency lights still running on backup power. Somewhere out there, Tanya was either surviving or she wasn't, and Marcus had no way of knowing which. The not knowing was almost worse than anything else, the uncertainty eating at him from the inside. "You okay?" It was Keisha, the former lieutenant, approaching with 2 cups of what looked like tea, though Marcus couldn't imagine where they'd found tea in all this chaos. "Honestly? I don't know," Marcus said, taking one of the cups. It was lukewarm but tasted like peppermint, surprisingly normal. "I'm alive, I'm inside, I'm not alone. That's more than a lot of people can say. But my sister's out there somewhere, and I got no idea if she made it. That's tearing me up." Keisha was quiet for a moment, sipping her tea and staring out at the darkness. "I get it. My niece Zoe, when all this started, I thought I'd lost her. Her mom, my sister, she was one of the first to turn in our neighborhood. I had to put her down myself." She said it matter-of-factly, but Marcus could hear the pain underneath. "Found Zoe hiding in a closet, scared out of her mind. If I'd been 5 minutes later, the zombies would have found her first. Sometimes I think about those 5 minutes, how close it was, and it makes me crazy. But she's here, she's safe, and I focus on that instead of all the ways it could have gone wrong." "How do you do it?" Marcus asked. "How do you keep going when everything's so messed up?" "You just do," Keisha said with a shrug. "You put one foot in front of the other, you do what needs doing, and you don't let yourself think too hard about the big picture. The big picture will crush you if you let it. So you make it small. Today I'm alive. Today I kept Zoe safe. Today we found shelter. Tomorrow I'll do it again. That's all anyone can do." It made sense in a hard, practical way. Marcus nodded slowly, turning Keisha's words over in his mind. He couldn't control whether Tanya was alive or dead, couldn't change what had happened over the past 2 days. All he could control was himself, his own actions, his own choices. He could choose to keep fighting, keep surviving, keep hoping that somehow things would work out. The night wore on, and gradually people drifted off to their sleeping areas, exhausted from another day of survival. Marcus lay down on his assigned mattress, Danny already asleep nearby, snoring softly. Around him, he could hear the quiet sounds of other people settling in, whispered conversations, someone crying softly in another room. Outside, the moans of zombies drifted up from the streets below, a constant reminder of the threat that surrounded them. Marcus closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easy. His mind was racing, replaying everything that had happened, thinking about what came next. Tomorrow he'd go on that scavenging run, search for supplies and any sign of Tanya. Tomorrow he'd start learning how to really survive in this new world, how to be part of a community instead of just running scared and alone. Tomorrow he'd take another step from fear towards something else, something that might have been courage if he squinted at it right. The world had ended on a Tuesday, but Marcus Webb was still here. Still breathing, still fighting, still hoping. And as long as that was true, there was a chance things could get better. A small chance, maybe, slim as hell, but a chance nonetheless. In the zombie apocalypse, sometimes a chance was all you got, and you had to make it count. Marcus was going to make it count. For himself, for Danny, for Tanya, wherever she was. He was going to survive this, and he was going to help others survive too. That was the promise he made to himself as he finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep, the sounds of the dead world echoing in his ears. The story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, and Marcus was determined to see how it ended, even if the ending was nothing like what anyone could have predicted back when the world made sense and Tuesdays were just Tuesdays. Marcus woke up to someone shaking his shoulder, and for a split second he forgot where he was, forgot about the zombies and the apocalypse and everything that had gone down. Then reality came crashing back like a bucket of ice water, and he jerked upright, hand reaching for the crowbar that he'd kept within arm's reach all night. The person doing the shaking stepped back quick, hands up in a don't shoot gesture, and Marcus recognized Rachel from the night before, looking apologetic but urgent. "Sorry to startle you, but Tommy's putting together the scavenging team and he wants you on it if you're up for it," Rachel said quietly, keeping her voice low so she didn't wake everyone else in the room. Through the barricaded windows, Marcus could see the first gray light of dawn creeping across the sky, painting everything in shades of dirty silver. "Team leaves in 20 minutes. You interested?" "Yeah, definitely," Marcus said, shaking off the last cobwebs of sleep. He'd crashed hard once he finally dozed off, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that came from total exhaustion, but he didn't feel rested. Probably wouldn't feel rested ever again until this nightmare was over, if it ever was. He grabbed his crowbar and followed Rachel out into the hallway, where a small group was already gathering. Tommy was there, checking over a backpack stuffed with empty bags and containers they'd used to haul back whatever supplies they found. With him were Keisha, who looked like she'd been up for hours already, alert and ready for action, and two other people Marcus hadn't met yet. One was a skinny white guy in his 30s with a ratty baseball cap and tattoos covering both arms, the other a heavy-set Asian woman maybe in her 40s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Marcus, good, you're up," Tommy said with a nod. "This is Derek Chen and Linda Park. They've been on a dozen runs, know the area, know how to stay quiet and stay alive. You'll follow their lead out there, do exactly what they say, when they say it. No arguments, no questions. Hesitation gets people killed. We clear?" "Clear," Marcus confirmed, though his stomach was already twisting itself into knots. Going back out there into the streets full of zombies, away from the relative safety of Riverside, felt like volunteering to stick his head in a lion's mouth. But he needed to do this, needed to look for any sign of Tanya, and sitting around waiting wasn't going to help anybody. Derek gave Marcus a once-over that was probably meant to be subtle but wasn't. "You ever done anything like this before? Any military training, survival experience, anything?" "Ran track in high school," Marcus said with a shrug. "And I've been alive for 3 days since this whole thing started, so I guess that counts for something." "Counts for a lot, actually," Linda said, her voice raspy like she'd smoked a pack a day for 20 years. "Most people didn't make it past day 1. You got good instincts, clearly. Just keep those instincts sharp out there and listen to what we tell you, you'll be fine." The team geared up quickly, everyone taking weapons from the stash, checking them over with practiced efficiency. Marcus kept his crowbar, but Tommy handed him a hunting knife in a belt sheath as backup, the blade long and wicked sharp. "Just in case," Tommy said. "And remember, noise is your enemy. We fight only if we absolutely have to. Otherwise, we're ghosts. In and out, quiet as possible." They went over the plan while the sun continued its slow crawl above the horizon. The target was a strip mall about 10 blocks east, a place that had a grocery store, a sporting goods shop, and a couple other stores that might have useful supplies. Derek had scouted it 2 days ago from a distance and said it looked relatively untouched, which either meant it was clean or it was a trap. Only one way to find out which. "We stick together, we move fast, and if things go sideways, we bail immediately," Keisha said, her lieutenant voice in full effect. No heroics, no trying to save the hall if it means losing people. People matter more than stuff. Everyone good with that? Everyone nodded, though Marcus wondered how true that really was. How long before supplies got scarce enough that the equation flipped, that stuff became more valuable than people? He pushed the thought away. Not today. Today they were still human, still had their priorities straight. They left through the fire escape, moving in single file, Tommy in the lead and Keisha bringing up the rear. The streets were eerily quiet in the early morning, just the distant sound of fires burning and wind blowing trash around. The zombies were less active during the day, or at least less aggressive, but that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. Marcus kept his eyes moving constantly, scanning windows and doorways and alleys for any sign of movement. They'd gone maybe 3 blocks when they encountered their first zombie, a lone one standing in the middle of an intersection like it was waiting for a bus that would never come. It was a man, or had been, wearing the remnants of a security guard uniform. Half its face was missing, just raw meat and exposed bone, and its milky eyes stared at nothing. The group froze, and Tommy made a hand gesture that everyone seemed to understand except Marcus. Derek leaned close and whispered barely loud enough to hear, "We're going around. Follow exactly where I step." They moved in a wide arc, giving the zombie plenty of space, and it never even turned its head, just kept staring off into the distance like it was locked in some kind of standby mode. Marcus's heart was hammering the whole time they crept past, sure that any second the thing would notice them and let out one of those awful moans that would bring every zombie in hearing distance. But they made it past without incident, and the intersection fell away behind them. 2 more blocks and they started seeing signs of serious chaos. Cars piled up in what must have been a massive wreck when everything went to hell, some of them burned out to just skeletal frames, others still intact but splattered with dark stains Marcus tried not to think too hard about. Bodies were scattered around, some of them clearly dead, put down with head trauma, others missing pieces like they'd been fed on. The smell was unreal, rotting meat and smoke and something chemical that burned the inside of Marcus's nose. "Don't look too close," Linda murmured from beside him. "You look too close, you start seeing people you knew, people you recognized. Easier if they're just obstacles." Marcus appreciated the advice even if it was grim as hell. He kept his eyes forward, focused on following Derek's path through the wreckage. They were halfway through when Marcus heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze. Not moaning, not the shuffle of zombie feet. This was an engine, a vehicle approaching fast, and in this dead city where nothing moved except zombies and the occasional desperate survivor, that could mean anything. "Cover, now!" Tommy hissed, and the group scattered, ducking behind wrecked cars and pressing themselves flat. Marcus ended up behind an overturned delivery van, his heart trying to pound its way out of his chest. Through the gap between the van and the pavement, he could see the street, and a moment later a truck came roaring into view, moving way too fast for safety, swerving around obstacles. The truck was a big pickup, the kind with an extended cab and a bed that could carry serious cargo, and that bed was full of people, maybe 6 or 7, all armed with guns and baseball bats and makeshift weapons. They were yelling, whooping like they were having the time of their lives, and as the truck passed Marcus's hiding spot he saw what they were doing. They were hunting zombies, leaning out of the truck bed to smash any undead they passed with bats and tire irons, laughing like it was a game. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when the truck slowed down near a burned-out building and one of the people in the back pointed at something Marcus couldn't see. The truck stopped, and 3 men jumped out, disappearing into the building. Marcus heard shouting, a scream that was definitely human and definitely terrified, and then the 3 men came back dragging someone between them, a woman who was fighting and crying and begging them to let her go. They threw her in the truck bed like she was a piece of luggage, and one of them said something that made the others laugh, and then the truck was moving again, roaring off down the street and out of sight. The whole thing had taken maybe 2 minutes, and Marcus felt like he was going to be sick. The zombies were monsters, yeah, but they were just following some kind of twisted instinct. Those people in the truck, they were something worse. They were human and they were choosing to be predators, taking advantage of the chaos to do terrible things. The scavenging team emerged from hiding slowly, everyone looking shaken. Raiders, Tommy said, his voice tight with anger. We've heard rumors about groups like that forming up, people who decided the apocalypse meant all rules were off. They're dangerous as the zombies, maybe more so because they're smart and organized. Did you see what they did? Marcus said, his hands clenched into fists. They grabbed that woman, just took her. We gotta do something, we gotta help her. We can't, Keisha said, and she looked pained saying it. I know how that sounds, I know how that feels, but there's 6 of us and at least 8 of them, and they've got guns. We go up against them, we die, simple as that. Best thing we can do is get back to Riverside and warn everyone that there are raiders operating in the area. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to say they had to at least try, but the logical part of his brain knew Keisha was right. This was the apocalypse, and you couldn't save everyone. Sometimes you couldn't save anyone. The best you could do was survive and help the people within your reach. It was a brutal calculus, one that made him feel hollow inside, but it was reality. They moved more carefully after that, hyper-aware that threats could come from any direction, not just the shambling dead. The strip mall came into view after another 20 minutes of tense, silent walking, and Derek had been right, it looked relatively intact. A few windows were broken, and the parking lot was full of abandoned cars, but there was no obvious sign of heavy looting or zombie presence. Too quiet, Linda muttered, voicing what everyone was thinking. Could be clean, could be full of those things just waiting inside. We go in careful, we clear each section before we start grabbing supplies. They approached the grocery store first, the big anchor store at one end of the strip mall. The automatic doors were frozen half open, stuck without power to operate them, making a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Tommy went first, his bat ready, and the others followed one by one. Inside, the store was dim and hot, the air stale from days without ventilation. Shelves were in disarray but not completely ransacked, and Marcus could see canned goods, boxes of pasta, other non-perishables scattered around. Derek, Linda, you two sweep the back sections, make sure we're alone in here, Tommy ordered quietly. Keisha, Marcus, start loading up. Anything canned, anything sealed, anything that won't go bad. We can sort it back at base. Marcus and Keisha got to work, moving down the aisles and filling their bags with whatever looked useful. Marcus grabbed cans of soup, vegetables, beans, boxes of crackers that were probably stale but still edible, packages of beef jerky that made his mouth water just looking at them. It felt surreal, shopping during the apocalypse, like he was on some twisted game show where the prize for winning was getting to eat tomorrow. They were maybe 10 minutes into the haul when Derek and Linda came back, moving fast, their faces urgent. We got a problem, Derek said, keeping his voice low. There's at least 15 zombies in the back, in what used to be the employee area. They're boxed in behind some shelving that collapsed, can't get out, but if we make too much noise they're gonna start throwing themselves at the barriers and eventually something's gonna give. Can we clear them out? Tommy asked. Not quietly, and not quickly, Linda said. We'd have to go back there and take them on in close quarters. Risky as hell. Tommy thought for a second, weighing options. We grab what we can from out here and we leave the back sections alone. Not worth the risk. Everyone move faster, fill your bags, and let's get out of here before those things realize we're around. They worked quickly, efficiently, everyone grabbing as much as they could carry. Marcus's backpack was getting heavy, the straps digging into his shoulders, but he kept loading it up. Every can, every box could mean another day of survival for the people at Riverside. As he was shoving packages of instant rice into a side pocket, he heard Keisha call his name quietly from a couple aisles over. Marcus, come here. You need to see this. He found her standing in front of a community bulletin board near the store's customer service desk, the kind of place where people used to pin up ads for garage sales and lost pets. Except now the board was covered in handwritten notes, dozens of them, messages from survivors looking for loved ones, marking safe locations, warning about dangerous areas. Marcus's eyes scanned over them frantically, looking for anything about Tanya, and then he saw it. A note in handwriting he'd recognize anywhere, his sister's loopy script that their teachers had always said was too informal. "Marcus, if you see this, I'm heading to the high school. The old Jefferson High where you went. There's supposed to be a Red Cross shelter there. I'll wait as long as I can. Stay alive, big brother. T." Marcus's hands were shaking as he unpinned the note from the board, reading it over and over to make sure it was real. Tanya was alive, or had been alive when she wrote this. She'd been here, in this store, probably standing in this exact spot. And she'd left him a message, a breadcrumb trail to follow. Jefferson High was maybe 2 miles from here, a straight shot if you didn't run into trouble, a death sentence if you did. "She's alive," Marcus said, his voice coming out choked. "My sister, she's alive. I gotta go, I gotta get to Jefferson High." "Not alone you don't," Keisha said firmly. "And not right now. We finish this run, we get these supplies back to Riverside, and then we plan a proper rescue mission. You go running off half-cocked, you'll just get yourself killed, and that doesn't help Tanya." Marcus wanted to argue, every fiber of his being screaming at him to drop everything and run to that high school, but he knew Keisha was right. Again. He folded the note carefully and tucked it into his pocket, a talisman, proof that there was still something worth fighting for in this dead world. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we do this smart. But we're going today, right? We're not waiting." "We'll talk to Tommy, figure out what's possible," Keisha promised. "But Marcus, you gotta prepare yourself for the possibility that she's not there anymore. That note could be days old. Things change fast out here." "I know," Marcus said, even though the thought made him want to scream. "But it's a chance. It's more than I had an hour ago." They finished loading up and regrouped near the front of the store. Tommy listened as Marcus explained about the note, his face thoughtful. "Jefferson High, that's doable. It's gonna be dangerous, probably crawling with zombies since it's a big public building, but if there's a Red Cross shelter operating there, it might actually be one of the safer spots around. We head back to Riverside, drop off these supplies, put together a bigger team, and we go check it out this afternoon." "Thank you," Marcus said, meaning it from the bottom of his soul. "Seriously, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Tommy said. "Let's just focus on getting home in one piece." The trip back to Riverside was tense, everyone loaded down with heavy bags and moving slower because of it. They had to take a different route to avoid a pack of zombies that had wandered into the street they'd used earlier, detouring through a residential neighborhood that felt like a ghost town. Houses stood empty, doors hanging open, yards overgrown after just a few days of neglect. Here and there they saw signs of struggle, blood smeared on sidewalks, cars crashed into trees and mailboxes, bodies that had been put down and left where they fell. They were 3 blocks from Riverside when they ran into the kid. He came stumbling out from behind a hedge, maybe 12 years old, skinny and filthy and terrified. He saw the group and froze like a deer in headlights, and Marcus could see him calculating whether to run or trust strangers. Before anyone could say anything reassuring, a zombie lurched around the corner of a house, heading straight for the kid with its arms outstretched and its mouth hanging open. Marcus moved without thinking, dropping his heavy pack and sprinting forward. He closed the distance in seconds, his track and field training kicking in, and swung the crowbar in a wide arc that caught the zombie in the side of the head with a wet crunch. The thing went down, and Marcus hit it twice more to make sure it stayed down, then turned to the kid who was staring at him with huge, shocked eyes. "You bit? You hurt?" Marcus asked, giving the kid a quick visual check. He looked okay, just scared and probably half-starved. "And no, I'm okay," the kid stammered. "I've been hiding, my family, they're all gone, and I didn't know where to go, and I'm so hungry." "What's your name, kid?" Tommy had come up beside Marcus, his voice gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "Liam. Liam Peterson." "Well, Liam, today's your lucky day. We've got a place, somewhere safe with food and other people. You want to come with us?" Liam nodded so hard Marcus thought his head might fall off, and just like that their group had picked up another stray. They got him a weapon, a sturdy piece of pipe that Linda pulled from her pack, and showed him how to hold it, how to swing if he needed to. The kid picked it up quick, desperation making for a good teacher. They made it back to Riverside without further incident, and the sight of the building had never looked so good to Marcus. They climbed the fire escape, did the secret knock, and were let in by one of the guards, an older black man named Curtis, who helped them haul their bags inside. The supplies were received like treasure, everyone crowding around to see what the team had brought back, and Marcus felt a small surge of pride at having contributed something useful to the group. But he didn't have time to celebrate. As soon as the supplies were sorted, he found Tommy and Keisha and laid out what he wanted to do. "I need to get to Jefferson High today. My sister might be there, and I can't wait. Every hour I wait is an hour something could go wrong." Tommy looked like he wanted to say no, to talk about how they'd already done one risky run today and people needed rest, but something in Marcus's face must have convinced him. "All right. We'll put together a team. But we're doing this smart, taking enough people to handle trouble, and we're setting a hard turnaround time. If we don't find her in 2 hours, we come back and try again tomorrow. Deal?" "Deal," Marcus agreed, though the thought of leaving without Tanya made him feel sick. The team came together quickly. Tommy, Keisha, Derek, and Javier volunteered to come along, enough people to handle a fight but not so many that they'd be slow and noticeable. They armed up with the best weapons Riverside had, which still wasn't saying much, mostly melee stuff and one handgun with 6 bullets that Tommy carried as an absolute last resort. Guns were loud, and loud meant every zombie in hearing range would come running. They left within the hour, moving fast through streets that were getting more dangerous as the day wore on. Zombies seemed to be congregating, forming larger groups, and twice the team had to hide and wait for packs to pass before they could continue. Marcus was practically vibrating with impatience, every delay feeling like torture, but he forced himself to stay calm, to follow the plan. Jefferson High came into view as the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon. The school was a sprawling complex, multiple buildings connected by covered walkways, with a big parking lot out front and a football field around back. There were people here, Marcus could see them moving around, and his heart leapt. A Red Cross shelter, actually functioning, actually keeping people safe. And maybe, just maybe, Tanya was inside. But as they got closer, Marcus realized something was wrong. The people weren't moving like survivors going about daily tasks. They were running, panicking, and the sound of gunfire echoed across the parking lot. Not a lot of gunfire, just a few scattered shots, but enough to spell serious trouble. "What the hell?" Derek muttered, and then they all saw it. The Raiders, the same truck from earlier that morning, parked right at the school's main entrance. The Raiders were attacking the shelter, and from the looks of it, the people inside didn't have nearly enough firepower to fight them off. "We gotta help them," Marcus said immediately, already moving forward, but Tommy grabbed his arm. "Hold up, think this through. We don't know what we're walking into. My sister might be in there." Marcus shot back. "Those Raiders are gonna hurt people, kill people, and we're just gonna stand here?" Keisha looked torn, the soldier in her clearly wanting to help but the survivor knowing how risky it would be. Then Javier spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "We didn't help that woman this morning. I've been thinking about that all day, about how we just watched them take her and did nothing. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to survive the apocalypse just to lose my humanity. I'm going to help. Anyone who wants to come with me, let's go. Anyone who doesn't, I understand." He started forward, and after a second, Marcus joined him. Then Keisha, swearing under her breath. Then Derek and Tommy, the latter muttering, "We're all gonna die, but at least it'll be for something worthwhile." They approached from the side, using parked cars and a bus as cover, getting close enough to assess the situation. There were 8 Raiders, all armed, and they were trying to break through the school's front doors which had been barricaded from inside. A few defenders were shooting from windows, but their aim was terrible and they were clearly running low on ammo. It was only a matter of time before the Raiders got through, and when they did, it would be a massacre. "We hit them fast and hard, try to take out as many as we can before they know we're here," Keisha whispered, slipping into tactical mode. Derek, you and Javier take the ones on the left. Tommy, Marcus, you're with me on the right. We focus on disabling, not killing if we can help it. We're not murderers. But if it's them or us, we don't hesitate. Clear? Everyone nodded, adrenaline turning fear into focus. They moved into position, and Keisha gave a silent 3 count on her fingers. 3, 2, 1, and they charged. Marcus had never been in a real fight before, not like this, not life or death against other humans who wanted to hurt him. The raiders were caught completely off guard, focused on the school and not expecting an attack from behind. Marcus swung his crowbar at the nearest one, a big guy with a shaved head, catching him in the knee. The raider went down screaming, and Marcus felt a flash of guilt that he smothered immediately. These people were trying to hurt innocents. They'd chosen this. Around him, chaos erupted. Javier was fighting with a fury Marcus wouldn't have expected from the quiet man, his makeshift spear jabbing and thrusting. Derek had disarmed one raider and was grappling with him, both of them struggling for control of a baseball bat. Tommy and Keisha were working together like a practice team, taking down raiders with brutal efficiency. But the raiders were recovering from their surprise, fighting back hard, and Marcus realized with sick certainty that this might not end well. Then the school doors burst open and more people came pouring out, shelter residents who decided to take the fight to their attackers. Suddenly the raiders were outnumbered and overwhelmed, and they knew it. The ones who could still move made a break for their truck, engines roaring to life, and they peeled out of the parking lot leaving their wounded behind. In the sudden quiet that followed, Marcus stood there breathing hard, his whole body shaking with adrenaline come-down. They'd done it. They'd actually fought off the raiders. Around him, people were checking on each other, tending to wounds, the defenders from the school mixing with Marcus's team in a confusion of introductions and thank yous. And then Marcus heard it, a voice he'd been dreaming about hearing for 3 days straight. Marcus? Oh my God, Marcus! He turned, and there she was. Tanya, alive and whole, pushing through the crowd with tears streaming down her face. They crashed into each other in a hug that nearly knocked them both over, and Marcus felt something in his chest that had been wound tight finally loosen. She was okay. Against all odds, against everything that could have gone wrong, she'd made it. I thought you were dead, Tanya was saying, her words muffled against his shoulder. I thought I'd never see you again. Same, same, Marcus managed, his own voice thick. But we're here, we're both here, and we're gonna be okay. The reunion was cut short by a man approaching, someone who looked like he was in charge of the shelter. He was in his 50s, wearing a Red Cross vest over civilian clothes, with the bearing of someone used to managing crises. I'm David Rodriguez, shelter coordinator. I can't thank you enough for what you did. Those raiders have been harassing us for 2 days, and I don't think we could have held out much longer. We've got a place, Riverside Apartments, about 2 miles west, Tommy said. It's not huge but it's secure. You're welcome to join us, all of you, if you want. Might be safer consolidating our numbers. David considered that, looking back at the school. This place is compromised now. Those raiders know we're here, they'll come back with more people. Moving might be our best option. Let me talk to my people. Over the next hour, as the sun continued its descent and everyone became acutely aware that night was coming, decisions were made. The shelter had about 30 survivors, and most of them voted to make the move to Riverside. They packed up quickly, grabbing supplies and weapons, organizing into groups for the trek. It would be dangerous, moving this many people through zombie-infested streets, but staying put was more dangerous. The journey back was tense, the large group moving as quietly as 50-plus people could, which wasn't very quiet at all. They encountered zombies 3 times, and each time they had to fight, had to put the creatures down as quickly and quietly as possible. Marcus stayed close to Tanya the whole time, refusing to let her out of his sight, and she seemed just as reluctant to leave his side. When Riverside finally came into view, with full darkness less than an hour away, Marcus felt a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled his knees. They'd made it. All of them, together, and they'd actually saved people instead of just surviving. It felt like a turning point, like maybe humanity had a chance after all. Getting everyone into the building was a logistical nightmare, but Rachel and the other Riverside residents stepped up, organizing the newcomers, finding space for everyone, sharing supplies. The building was crowded now, way more people than it had been designed to comfortably hold, but there was also an energy there that hadn't existed before. Hope, purpose, the sense that they were building something instead of just hiding and waiting to die. That night, everyone gathered for a meeting that was part planning session, part celebration. David Rodriguez and Tommy hit it off immediately, both natural leaders who recognized the value in working together. They talked about combining their resources, their knowledge, their skills. David's group had a doctor, an actual MD who'd been volunteering at the Red Cross shelter, plus people with construction skills, communications experience, all sorts of useful abilities. "We're stronger together," Tommy said to the assembled crowd. "Separately, we're just small groups trying to survive. Together, we're a community. We can defend ourselves, scavenge more effectively, maybe even start thinking long-term about growing food and establishing a real sustainable situation." "It won't be easy," David added. "We've got challenges ahead: resource management, security, figuring out how to deal with the raiders and the zombie herds that seem to be forming. But I believe we can do this. I believe we can survive and maintain our humanity in the process." Marcus sat listening with Tanya beside him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something he'd thought was gone forever. He felt like the future might actually exist, like there might be tomorrows worth living for. The fear was still there, probably always would be in this new world, but alongside it was something else. Determination. Resilience. Maybe even courage. He thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 days, how he'd gone from a guy who could barely keep his own life together to someone who'd fought zombies and raiders, who'd helped save lives, who'd found his sister against impossible odds. The world had ended, but Marcus Webb was still here, still fighting, and so were all these other people who refused to give up. "We're gonna make it," Tanya said quietly, like she could read his thoughts. "Aren't we?" Marcus looked around at the faces in the crowded room, saw fear and grief and exhaustion, but also strength and hope and determination. He saw Keisha with her arm around Zoe, keeping her niece safe like she'd promised. He saw Javier and Derek talking quietly about reinforcing the building's defenses. He saw little Liam, the kid they'd rescued, actually smiling at something Rachel was showing him. He saw humanity, battered but not broken, scared but not defeated. "Yeah, Marcus said, meaning it with everything he had. "Yeah, we're gonna make it." The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be more challenges ahead, more fights, more losses, more days when giving up seemed easier than going on. But there would also be victories, moments of joy, connections forged in fire that would last however long any of them had left. The apocalypse had taken the world they knew, but it hadn't taken everything. It hadn't taken their humanity, their capacity for courage, their will to survive and protect each other. From fear to courage, that was the journey Marcus had made in just a few days, and it was the journey everyone in that room was making in their own way. The zombies were still out there, the raiders were still a threat, and 1,000 other dangers lurked in this new world. But they would face those dangers together, as a community, as survivors who'd chosen to fight instead of surrender. Marcus settled back against the wall, Tanya's shoulder warm against his, and listened to the voices of his new family discussing plans and hopes and possibilities. The night outside was full of monsters, but in here, there was light. Maybe not much, maybe fragile, but light nonetheless. And as long as that light kept burning, there was a chance. A chance to rebuild, to survive, to show that even in humanity's darkest hour, courage could triumph over fear. The world had ended on a Tuesday, but on this night, maybe a week later or 1,000 years later in terms of how much had changed, a new world was beginning. Not a perfect world, not an easy world, but a world where people still fought for each other, still hoped, still refused to let the darkness win completely. And Marcus Webb, former high school dropout, reluctant hero, and stubborn survivor, was proud to be part of it. whatever came next, they would face it together. And that made all the difference.